So, do the next thing.
Okay, good morning. A good gebenched year, which this year we need extra special brachas. You know, as is on everybody's mind, whether we like it or not, the events going on in Eretz HaKodesh and Eretz Yisrael. So I felt that the most appropriate thing to do is, obviously you're fulfilling a tremendous role, which is the role of Limud HaTorah, Hashkem B'Hariv, that is equally important as the Gashmi's Dika war. But I think because of so much confusion and people are so overwhelmed and shocked, all of us, that it would be good to give a shir, if we can call it that, of some direction here. You know, Baruch Hashem, Magdim Refu Lamaka, we have a Rebbe who spoke about situations like this in the past. 6-Day War, Yom Kippur War, terrorist attacks, you know, time and again, and there is a lot to learn from that. You know, the Rebbe spoke obviously to give chizuk, but also to give hadracha. How do you respond to something like this? And this is the time where leaders rise. What you see for so many people is that we too become victims, because what do you say? What do you tell people? What are we going to do? What happened? How is this such a colossal mistake? What is the Eibishter thinking? You know. So as I said, I thought it would be wise to collect the Rebbe's perspective on it. So, and it is ultimately it starts with a Torah perspective, but it also gives us guidelines. Now, all of you are being trained here in Kedel. At the end of the day, as the Rebbe Rashab said, Temchet Mimim, it's not just another place to learn Torah. That's a big thing, but he was training Kolam al Yetzel Melchemes Beis David. He was training spiritual soldiers that they would have to face, as the Rebbe Rashab says in the famous Sikh in Tofrei Samach Aleph, that the Rebbe quotes so often, to fight the spiritual wars of Ikvis and Mashiach. So it's incumbent upon us to have the Damash Toshiv, to have direction and guidance. Whoever it is that you're going to be speaking to today, tomorrow. I was literally yesterday and the day before on 2 big Zoom calls. One with over 200 shluchim on campus, and another at night, if I bring Tuesday night, till 4 a.m. with hundreds of shluchim, a Zoom. And I saw the shluchim themselves are like, you know, what do we say? What do we do? What do we... So we have obviously the miftzayim, and there's things that we're supposed to do. But it's more than that. It's also showing strength. You get up in front of a kehillah, what do you say to them? I was Simchas Torah myself in California. You know, so the shliach asked me to speak. So what did I say? I spoke words I heard from the Rebbe. Tav Shalom Medalad, Tav Shel Chov Zayin, Chov Ches, and so on. So I think it's critical. You know, there are times we learn Lasukah, sometimes we learn Lagel Teira V'Yadir, and sometimes Teira is Lasukah Shmaita Liber de Hilchas, to know how to speak to people. And again, we don't have to be machadish anything. Just have to gather the Rebbe's approach. The Rebbe taught us a methodology, not just words, not just ideas, a method. And I want to talk about that. I think it's critical. And as I said, we all have an achrayus today, to be on the offense, not just to sit around and say, okay, something happens, we'll react to it. The Rebbe wanted always to go on offense, and you see it in every situation. So I want to just collect it all together and try to sum it up in practical terms as well. So let's begin from the beginning, which is, you know, how do you look at something like this? So we all know the famous Rambam, the Rambam that is cited in Hilchas Tainis. The Rebbe brings it so often that when a catastrophe happens to an individual or a community, or the opposite, a community or individual, Chaz v'Sholom, to say Mikra Nikris, it's Achzorius, he calls it. It's inhumane. It's cruel and insensitive to call it just happened. But it's a time for a wake-up call of introspection, L'fashvers b'maisav, and so on, the Lashenis he uses there. And that's the basis why we fast. The Dalet Tainis, Tisha B'Av, Shavasar B'Tammuz, and the other Tainis. So let's just talk about that for a second. Many people misunderstand this Rambam. They think that it means that you have to start pointing fingers and finding people's sins. Whether it was about the Holocaust or now, let's find people did Avedas, so the Eibush is being meinish. That's what he means, the Fashrish B'maisav. But if you read the Rambam, he doesn't say that. He says you have to look at yourself, not at others. And Beferish doesn't even say it's an Einish. He doesn't say it's an Einish and that's why. He says you have to know that you the Eibishter made Bashgacha Pratis, it happened when you were alive in this earth and you witnessed it. Don't Chaz v'Shalom to ignore it. It means it has to be a wake-up call. And in many ways, it's such a Yesodistic statement because on the contrary, it means that not that you caused it or someone else caused it, that you have the ability to address it and you have the ability to counter it. And we'll talk about how. But it's actually an empowering statement that we're not victims. We're not just sitting back and the Eibushter does things and we're sitting. We all know the Friedrich Rebbe's explanation in the end of Masechta Seita, where it says after all the simonim, the negative things that will happen because of Mashiach, ve'ein lanu le'yishayin al avinu shebashamayim, says in Masechta Seita. Everybody learns pshat that after all the negative things, it's like a bracha, the Simon B'Tev, that we have no one to rely on. It's going to be so bad that we have no one to rely on but the Eibishter. Sounds beautiful. But Tachim Bashem comes the Friedrich Rebbe and says that that's also part of the problems in Ikvus and Mashiach. Of course we have to be the Shoinal of Inu Shebashamayim, but the Eibishter also gave us keiches. For example, when the Eden broke into 4 different groups before Kriyas Yamsuf, the Mitzrayim behind them, and the Yam before them, and they had all kinds of philosophies. Each one had their thing. This one said, let's return to Mitzrayim. This one said, let's go to war. This one says, Nipul B'yam. And one said, let's daven. What's wrong with davening? The Eibishter said, no. He said, Atem Tachrishon. Because I created you to act. And the answer ultimately was, Vayisou. You have to move. So the Eibishter obviously is behind all of it. But he wants us to be partners, and part of the Eibishter's plan is that I'm giving you keiches. Why do we go to a doctor, Rahman al-San, if there's why don't we just say, Shoin alavinu shebashamayim, sit home, the Eibishter will heal, and Yashem nefecha. Because that's one of the ways, the Eibishter is merapeh. He has shluchim. The Rebbe once told a chassid who wrote to him, the chassid asked the Eitzah, and the Rebbe told him to go katsas yedidim evinim. So he wrote back to the Rebbe, he wants the Rebbe's Eitzah. Yedidim evinim. And the Rebbe responded, I don't know, b'ksav or b'alpeh, and the Rebbe said, Was ardir, as ich will empfern, durch Yedidim Mevinim. The Rebbe said, ich will empfern durch Yedidim Mevinim. That's part of how, and the Rebbe says a number of times that when we're told to rely on Teva, it doesn't mean because Teva Chaz v'Shalom has an akoyach. It's a gegarzim b'yad ha'chetzev. It's one of the ways the Eibishter set up. He gave us seichel, he gave us midas, he gave us intelligence to figure out solutions. And that too comes b'koyach of the Eibishter. So that's the first thing that we have to understand, that this is every catastrophe. So as soon as you hear such news, terrible news, no one's going to diminish it at all. When you hear, I don't even want to say the numbers, but we're talking about over 1,200 nefashos, innocent men, women, and children. And each one of us would have been, Rahman al-Islam, a target if you were there. Because they were looking to kill Jews, period. Mamish like the Holocaust. So, it's not a numbers game, obviously, because even one person is a Eilam Malay. But when you hear such numbers, and then you, again, talk about how they were killed, chulu v'chulu. So I'm not going to discuss all that. That's not our role to look at the news and follow every graphic detail. So it's impossible for a human being that has any decency and normal sensitivity to not be shocked and overwhelmed by that. Lama us Hashem koch, how did he allow such a thing? And of course, all our questions, how did Israel allow such a thing? How could there be such a breach of security, etc., etc.? I mean, a simple camera on your house, you catch someone that's walking by your house. Here you're talking about one of the most sophisticated. So these are big questions. But the Rebbe always says, and this brings me to the next point, which is continuing, that we don't ask why. We don't understand the mysteries. Especially as Yisrael, Eretz Asher Ein Hashem Elokecha Ba, Mereishis Hashana Vad Achris Shana. And the Rebbe was maftiach time and again is the safest place on earth. In case anyone wonders, Chaz v'Shalom, to say there's a shinui in all this. This is based on psukim. There's an Eibishter. We don't have an answer, just like we don't have an answer for the Holocaust. But never think that not having an answer makes us weaker. It means there are things that are l'mayla that beyond our understanding. Shteik. Kach ola b'machshava. You think the Eibishter couldn't give a whole reason of why Chochmas Dema, he allowed the 10 Asara Aruge Malchus? When Malachim and Mesha says, Ru Terev is Ruschara, says Shtek, Kach ola b'machshava. Vayidemaran, she'll talk about shortly some more about that. So bottom line is, that's not a statement of weakness. It's a statement actually of strength. Not everything has to be understood by the human being. And we actually taina ad mosai, and we're allowed to have complaints, and we can bet the hi rotzen, that the Eibishter will be mishana the gzeira or the rotzen. What we do ask is not why, but what are we going to do about it? This is a statement from the Rebbe hundreds of times. I'll just share two anecdotes. One, a letter I saw in English, where a doctor writes to the Rebbe, why? The big why question of the Holocaust. And the Rebbe goes, Hadichas, this point, he says, if the Eibishter wanted us to know why, he would have told us. If it's Negei and Arvedus Hashem, of course the Eibishter would have told us. Why? Since he didn't tell us why, it means it's not Negei to us to know why, to do our Aved. What we have to ask is, what are we going to do about it? It's a 3-page letter. It's in English. If anybody wants it, just post on the Kail group. I'll be happy to send you I'll put an image of the English letter of the Rebbe. At the end of the letter, just interestingly, the Rebbe writes, you may think my letter was written philosophically, theoretically. You are a Holocaust survivor, or have a family of a Holocaust survivor. And I'm writing to you as abstract. So you should know I'm also a Holocaust survivor. I don't remember the exact lashon of the Rebbe, but he writes it befedish. I never saw it anywhere else. I lost my grandmother, my brother, my grandmother, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and other family members. Now the Rebbe writes, I'm not talking to you adrasha momayl lamata. It's just interesting to know that. But the whole point of the letter, if you read it well, is we're not victims. And the second story I want to share is Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau. He was in Yechidus. First time he came to Eretz Yisrael was Tafshel Lamed Aleph. That was right after Yom Kippur Milchama. You're all, I think the only 2 people in this room old enough to remember that. It's just, we know that Yom Kippur Milchama. So the Rebbe asked him. The Rebbe said, I heard the story straight from him. The Rebbe asked him to sit down. He was then a Rav in Netanya. He was the chief rabbi of Netanya. Later he would become the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe asked him to sit down. And the Rebbe, one of the first questions the Rebbe asked him is, what's the matzav ruach? What's the mood like in Eretz Yisrael? I have to remember, in stark contrast to Milchama Sheishes Hayom, the 6-day war, which created a tremendous euphoria and Hisedus. In the Rebbe's words, Yitaka b'Shefer Gadol. I say this, you could even say that the Baal Tshuva movement in America and so much the status of Gein Yankiv that happened after 1967, it was mamish like miracles in 6 days of Chulu. In contrast, the Yom Kippur War, mistakes were made, there was arrogance, it was surprise, similar, uncannily similar 50 years later. And Baruch Hashem, everything turned around, but there were over 2,000 nefashos. It was not good. So the Matzav Ruach was not a pleasant one, even though the Eden won and so on, but it came at a great cost. So the Rebbe asked him, what's the Matzav Ruach? So his answer was that Eden fragn was vet zayin. That's what he said. Ma yiyeh. The way he tells the story is that the Rebbe grabbed his wrist like this. He grabbed Rabbi Lau's wrist and said to him, Rav Lau, by Eden fragt man nicht was vet zayin, man fragt was geht man ton. Not ma yiyeh, ma naseh. Not what will be, but what are we going to do? Think about this. This is like not just it's not just a melitza, different change of expression. A victim asks, what's going to be? You throw up your arms. What's going to be? A leader never asks what's going to be. A commander-in-chief does not ask what's going to be. Okay, we have a setback. It sort of happened. What are we going to do about it? So this is an attitude that I would say, without question, that the Rebbe didn't just say it. Obviously, the Rebbe is the leader, but he taught us to be leaders. This is the language. This is the ruach. This is the way we should look at things. We don't lie down and die. We may not have answers, and that's the first thing we need to acknowledge, because many people are going to ask that question. They'll say to you, Rabbi, you know God. Well, how did God allow such a thing? His own people. And the answer is we don't have an answer. We can't answer that question. And no answer will be sufficient also. I think it was the Alter Belzer Rebbe that said that even if the Eibishter wanted to explain to him why the Holocaust happened, he wouldn't want to hear. As if what, we're going to get up Hasbara Sichlis, why Rahman al-Islam 6 million and 1.5 million kinder, etc. There's no Hasbara. And that's not weakness. We, the Jewish people are here today for one reason. We suffered, this is not the first time we suffered, unfortunately. Besides the previous wars. And before that, the Holocaust. And before that, the pogroms. And before that, the Inquisition. And the whole Middle Ages, the Crusaders. And I go back all the way. Every empire. The Romans, Golos Edom. Before that, the Persians. And before that, the Babylonians. And the Assyrians. And the Greeks. You go back to Mitzrayim. To the Egyptian Empire. What we suffered more than anyone. And the biggest question is, none of those empires are here today. They have bigger armies and more arms and more money and land. Mamish, my tremendous empires. Not one of them is left. We have no answer. We have no descendants from them. Yes, we have children, but no one relates to them. And here we are, Atam kol ha'am. Everyone asked that question. What's the answer? Because we didn't just have physical power. Lei b'keach v'lei b'chayil, ki im beruach. We had amunah and betochen. Why? Because the men made cheshbenis. When Pari made the gzeira to kill the boys, so like all anti-Semites make the mistake that our power is the men. They're strong, weapons, they can go to arm, they can challenge you. And Pari heard from his stargazers that Mashiach Shel Yisrael will rise, will be a zachar, a man. So he said, kill all the men. He didn't realize, thank God, that our power is not in brute strength. He thought women and children you could subdue, and that's that. It was the woman that said, we're going to have children, even though there will be, Rahman al-Islam, there were plenty that were killed and thrown into the Nile River. But the Gemara says in Seta, they went out to the fields. And of course, the most important, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yocheved, put him in a basket on the water. And he was the most important one of all. In other words, the Amunah Pshuta, that you can't destroy with weapons. That's not statistical. That's not about numbers. And we're here because of that. So we have to explain to people that yes, we have to have a strong army, and we have to do everything b'derech ha'teva. Absolutely. We don't turn the other cheek. We will defend ourselves. Just for the record, Absalom is not walking out because he's protesting. He has a shlichus. Look, I want to tell them that you're not walking out because you're protesting what I'm saying. No, I know. No, that happens sometimes. You speak and somebody walks out as a angry. That's not here the case. I've had that. I've had plenty of Palestinian and Muslim followers on YouTube who are doing exactly that now. Every time I post something, we post something. Anyway, that's time a word from our sponsor here. But back to the topic at hand. So the statement we make, and again, I'm taking this all from the Rebs Approach. I'll quote some sikhs shortly, more details. So our approach is, number one, is we must respond. Number two, we're leaders. We have to be proactive, not reactive. We're not on the defense. And finally, what I'm saying right now is, Yaakov Avinu prepared 3 ways when he met Esav and realized that Esav was still with Abba Me'esish and he was coming to fight with him. He prepared through tefillah. He prepared a bribe to appease him, and he prepared for Milchama. So thank God he didn't need Milchama at the time. So you could say, why did he dive into the Eibishter? Why is that not enough? Because as I said before, it's not just tefillah. The Eibishter says, yes, pray to me, and then go out to war if you need to. So there, Baruch Hashem, he solved it with a bribe, with appeasing him, with the matanis, which is also b'derech hatev. Didn't just rely. And so we prepare for war. We're not like the thing people say, oh, you're a maimin, you just lie down. How many people accuse Jews of Rahman al-Islam? We went like slaughtered to the sheep to the concentration camps. Chaz v'sholem, the Idna not like that. We hate war, and we hate blood, and we hate anything that's negative. We're not warriors. Kiseitze le'molchama, the Rebbe explains. You go out to war. It's not you. It's outside of you. And it's alei vecha. And that's where the Eibishter will help us. Nesat Hashem lekecha b'yadecha. But it's kiseitze le'molchama. When you have to, you have to. We lock our doors. We're prudent people. We're not idiots. We're not just blind faith and say, I'll go outside and expose myself and be vulnerable to the enemy. No, there are enemies. And we'll talk about that again in a few moments more about Siman Shin Chav Tes. But at the same time, we also know that the Milchama is also a Ruchnisdika one. And why we're here today, Am Yisrael Chai, is Ani Hashem Leishanisi, Ubnei Yisrael Leichalisam. Why is that a definite? Because we're connected to Ani Hashem Leishanisi. So Rahman al-Aslan, even with our losses and even when there's tragedy, it doesn't change the Nitzchias because the connection, Atem Adveikim B'Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kulchem Hayem. So our response has to be, what are we going to do? And that's the statement of a leader. Not what's going to be, and everybody wrings their hands and cries. Yes, Eis Lifkes is a time to cry. Even Rahman al-Aslan, when you sit Shiva, you have to sit Shiva, but it's not weakness. That's recognizing with respect and dignity and sensitivity the pain. The Eibishter created us as human beings, and there's pain when there's loss. For someone that doesn't have pain when there's loss, even a tzaddik gomer mamash, who knows the Das Elyon, also sits Shiva. The Rebbe sat Shiva for the Rebbetzin and for other losses that he had. It's not like you say, the Eibishter is Hamzul Teva, why do we have to cry? That's not the case, we cry. However, that doesn't weaken us, on the contrary, it creates more strength. So indeed, what do you see? All this was not just theory. What did the Rebbe do after every war that was fought in Eretz Yisrael? People may not know this, but all the Mivtzoyim came as a result of the wars in Eretz Yisrael. The first was Mivtza Tfil. So the Rebbe turned that into a whole Mivtza, of course based on the Pasuk, V'rol kol amei oretz, Kishem Elokecha, Znikar Elecha, V'yorem Imeka. Mivtza Tfil. This was in addition to the physical war. The Rebbe said we also need the Ruchnisdike. After the terrorist attack in Tov Shalamed Gimel on Ma'alot in northern Eretz Yisrael, in a school where many children were killed, Mivtza Mezuzah. Mezuzah Shemed Alsis Yisrael Shmira. Again, it's not guaranteed, but like the Rebbe explained, like a helmet, it's an additional form of spiritual protection that is necessary just like physical protection. Tov Shalamed Al comes the Yom Kippur War, or the other three Mivtzayim, first 5 Mivtzayim, Mivtza Teira, Bais Molas Farim, Mivtza Tzedakah, all in Tov Shalamed Dalet. In Lamed Hey came the Mivtzayim for the women Neshek, Chala, and Ner Shabbos Kedesh V'Yontif, Taras Mishpacha, and Kashrus. And Lamed Vav was Shnas HaChinuch, and the end of Lamed Vav, the final 10th Mivtza Avis Yisrael. Look at the times. Why couldn't the Rebbe stop Mivtza Avis Yisrael and Tov Shel Chof? But the Avis Yisrael is the Yesod. It was very clear that Eretz Yisrael wasn't just because to help Eretz Yisrael, because Eretz Yisrael is the center of the world for all of us, for Eden, for the whole world. As we see, we daven toward it. So everything happens in Eretz Yisrael and it affects every person on this earth, especially Eden. So when we strengthen through these Mivtzayim, we help Eretz Yisrael. It was all connected to the wars. Now, would the Rebbe have come out with the Mivtzayim if there were no Milchamas? Maybe. But it's interesting, it always came right after, which is a statement of itself. Now, what do we try to preserve? Not the tzar that happened, and there was tzar in each of these cases, what we build from it. Which is why when we say Yiskar, anyone who says Yiskar, and other things you always connected to a mitzvah. Because we don't just talk about what's missing. What did the Rebbe say when the people said, let's leave an empty chair by the Seder for those that were lost in the Holocaust? And the Rebbe came out and said, why leave an empty chair? Fill the chair with an id. Bring someone to be at the table. You don't just remember the vacuum, that which was lost. What would that id, who was taken from us, be doing now? He would have built families and he would have his own Seder. So what's the best way to honor him is not just to honor that he's not here, is to bring someone. You see, constantly, and I can give, thousands of examples. But it all comes down to, you see a method from the Rebbe that was consistent, that the negative things have to be turned into positive things. And that's empowering. I said this, mamish, we're dancing our kofis, the tragedies happened Shabbos morning. Eretz Yisrael, Yontif was already over Motzei Shabbos, but we also Yontif continued Sunday. So before that kofis, I spoke about this, or before davening, I don't remember now exactly. And you can't imagine, I saw the reaction of people didn't take away from the Tsar. We all know what happened was terrible. But it gives you a sense of confidence. And a key word to remember is that victim is not only that the person gets killed, it's all of us that remain, and if you get demoralized, in the words of the Alter Rebbe and Tanya, atzvus, that doesn't bring any teyelis, it comes from the Yetzer Hara. That's part of, and people actually say, Hamas and terrorists, that's what they want. They want to create panic in the hearts of people. Because panic is powerful. When you see in Muhammad, one of the taxis in Muhammad is not just weapons, it's psychological war. It's to get the other side to be weak. Whereas the Alter Rebbe gives the classic example in Perek Chavav, that when two people are wrestling, and one person is weak, even if he's stronger, he's gonna lose. Because you have to have the morale, you have to have the clarity, you have to have the strength. So that's why it's just as critical. If an army is demoralized, they could have all the weapons in the world. They could have all the power, firepower. They could have larger numbers. They will not succeed. You have to have strength and confidence. The Rebbe would bring often the custom that used to be in armies of old. They would sing a march of Netzachim, a victory march, before they even started the first battle. What kind of seder is that? You didn't even fight a battle. How do you know you're going to win? Because that's how it is. Like the Tur says about Rosh Hashanah. We wear Lev Shim Levenim because we know, Umazu knows, what the Lashon there is, the personality of the Eibishter, that we will be Menatzeach. We don't have to wait till the end. All this is the building of strength and confidence that we know, no question, that we are going to win. When someone has that, that is critical. I can tell you, I saw in the faces of people, all of us, when you have that attitude, again, it doesn't take away from the challenges, but it gives you keiches to deal with the challenges. Like we say, we don't have answers, but we have what we're not looking for answers, we're looking for strength. So these are some of the key points in the main approach to it. But I want to now quote and bring it down to a little more, history and also some background. So when the Rebbe spoke about, and I did it not just now, but in the past, a lot of research in the Sikhs, especially after the 6-Day War, before the 6-Day War, and then Yom Kippur. So we all know the Sikhs are going around, especially the ones that Rebbe spoke, Yud Gimel Tishrei Tov Shel Amud Daled, and then Shabbos Chol HaMoed Sukkos, that the Rebbe spoke that year. But you see a pattern where the Rebbe speaks about, especially I'm going to talk about the Tov Shel Chav Zayin now, where the Rebbe Beferish called it Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol. That's what the Rebbe said, Haye Bayemahu Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol, that's the 6-Day War, the Netzachim. That's a big statement. The Rebbe is using a nevuah about Mashiach on a war that was fought in Eretz Yisrael. I mean, there's unbelievable aces. If you want to check out the second Fabring in Shabbos Bereshis, Hemshach to Simchas Torah, that year Simchas Torah was Shabbos. Friday. So then we go right into Shabbos Bereshis. And Shabbos Bereshis, the Rebbe would have two Fabringans. The regular 1:30 Fabringen, and the Fabringen before the Shkia. That would be when the Rebbe would wash, the Keshel Bracha, etc. That Fabringen is, in my opinion, one of the must-read Fabringens. And also a second one, Yutas Kislev Tavshin Chav Ches, which is similar ideas. The Rebbe speaks about Riches Gdela, about a lot of very Sederzdike things. And the point that he said there, that I was looking in, the Rebbe says, I was looking in Sefer Maimorim Yiddish, and there's a mimer there, I forgot the pasuk about, not Shefer Gadol, Shefer Stam, and I realized that the Rebbe the Shver, is saying Nevuah, open Nevuah. Because he describes there some psukim in Yeshaya, some of the psukim of the Yehudim, Losselave, on Milchama, the First World War, rather, the Second World War. And then the Rebbe says, the Rebbe used the word Nevuah. And then the Rebbe says that Al Pizeh, the 6-Day War is the other pasuk, Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol. There it's Shefer Stam. Mamish, unbelievable explanation of how you look at the 20th century, the wars. It's not justifying the wars, it's understanding behind the scenes, the inside story, so to speak. And the Rebbe identifies the 6-Day War, Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol. But it's there, the Rebbe said, for the fulfillment of the end of the pasuk. Now what? It says, Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol, Uba Evdim Eretz Asher, V'nedochem Eretz Mitzrayim, L'shtachvus al Har Kodesh. Will there be the L'shtachvus al Har Kodesh? In other words, the Eibishter does the Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol, the wake-up call. Now, are we going to respond? And we need to respond. Yutes Kislev Chavches, you can mamish see the Rebbe's tremendous tsar. I would call it even, I don't know if he uses the word, but definitely the word Bechia L'Deiris. Because the Rebbe says, on leider mit nicht eis genutzt, es darf zu sein, this, his damnus. Like, I was a little kid in Chav Zayin, I was 10 years old, 11 years old, 10 years old. But I remember the Sichos of Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, obviously, very well. And there the Rebbe speaks Mashiach. I would be ready to say that Tovshech Chav Zayin and Tovshech Chav Ches, based on the Rebbe's Sichos, was probably the biggest Eis Rotzen for Mashiach, stronger even than Nun Aleph. Obviously, the further you go, you get closer to the Gula. But I mean, in the Asius, Mamish, the Rebbe saw his damnus here for a wake-up call for the Gans Klal Yisrael and for the whole world. The Shtachvas HaKachi, which is Mamish Gula. You have to see the Sichos inside, and you'll see what I mean. So what do you see from this? That yes, the war was a miraculous war. But the bottom line, the Rebbe saw it all as steps toward the Geula. But we have to do our part. I don't like to say this, especially in a time when we have to be united and have to be complete ba'achdus and definitely not critical. Speak only b'shvach and shel Yisrael. But without question, all the sichos of the Rebbe and the crying and the yelling and everything about Shleimus Haaretz that would come in the years afterwards, especially in the Lameds and the Mems, the Nun, Shleimus Haaretz, all began Chav Zayin because the Rebbe felt that if you nipped it in the bud then and it was used properly, we wouldn't have all these tzaras. I was a kid. I was 14 years old when I went to Eretz Yisrael the first time. This was Tavshin Lamed Aleph, 1971. So we're talking about, 5 years after the Six-Day War. I could tell you, there was b'chlal not an issue, not even a havamina, can go anywhere. I went to Shar Shechem, I went to Chevron, I went to Shechem, wherever. I took Arab taxis, I took Arab buses. Something's not even a havamina. Not just today, it was the last chves. Mamish no issue. I was a 14-year-old kid, clearly a Jewish boy. Wasn't even told, be careful. Because the pachad that they had, they were losers of the war. So I'm sure the sinner was there, don't get me wrong. But they understood there's a winner and a loser, as the Rebbe said, as a Eid in Eretz Yisrael, gitzittet far Eid. Because they saw. What changed? How suddenly get the chutzpah to attack Eden? It's because we allowed them to. We showed vulnerability. When you treat the loser and you make them feel like a winner, what do you think is going to happen? Imagine after World War II, after everything the Churban, the Nazis, the Germans created, and America would say, or the Allies would say, we'll give you conditional surrender. After we bombed all your cities, we've won, but conditional, we want to save face. To save face and your pride. No, it was unconditional surrender. There's an expression like that. Absolute unconditional. You could say, why not have Rahmanis? You already destroyed them. Because if you give the enemy who started a war against you, even even a crumb, even a breka, anything, the next thing is they feel, oh, you know what? Maybe I didn't really lose. When there's a war like that, there has to be clear terms. There's right and there's wrong. There's a winner and there's a loser. This is a rule in all psychology. It's a rule in all business negotiation, in anything. Not because we want to be achzorim and step on your head. But you have to know. And if you don't, it creates big problems. But the Rebbe cried out and said then, Shas Ma'aseh, they're already offering the keys back to the Mufti and the Arabs on the Temple Mount. It wasn't because the Rebbe was just a strong, as they say, hawk, and a right wing, very, everything belongs to Eden. Because the Rebbe understood human psychology, basic human psychology, especially as Seina. You win a war, and that's that. And you dictate the terms. You don't have them dictate the terms. The terms would be menschlich. What do the Allies end up doing? They rebuild Germany, they rebuild Japan with billions and trillions of dollars. That's what they ended up doing to their own enemy. But it's on our terms, not on your terms. Not because you have the right, but because we want to give you the right. And this was, unfortunately, a tremendous mistake. Now, today is not the time to talk about this, because we're not here to look at what mistakes we made. Now's the time of total achdus. We have to be one, mamish, support everything. But I'm saying it to you, even though I know it's recorded and all that, because we need to know behind the scenes. When the Rebbe said this, he wasn't saying it to point fingers. Even Tovshin Lamed Dalet, when the Rebbe says befedish, that the events happening today are why did Lama Os Hashem Kocha, the Rebbe says Shleimus Haaretz, and the Rebbe said Mi Yehudi, if you look at the Sikha. So people asked me, Shulchim asked me yesterday, a few days ago, the Rebbe saying, I mean, the blood was still warm from all the casualties. They didn't even bury the bodies yet. The Rebbe is like pointing fingers. Doesn't sound characteristic. So I said, Chaz v'sholem. What do you think it's like when those that say that the Holocaust happened because the Eden were not religious or they did Avedas, so they were to punish them. It's mamish something the Rebbe she'el mufrich legamri, the Rebbe says, Vayichi Shmeis Tavshinu Nal. So the Rebbe is saying such a thing. No, the Rebbe, as a Rebbe, is telling us the emes. And as they say, when the Tata leint, the Hetman Nar Brachas. The Rebbe wasn't saying it as a Einish. Sibah Mesubav. You open up your living room to someone who's your enemy, what do you think is going to happen? It's just a matter of time. Someone that declared war on you is just saying, and here comes Siman Shin Chavtes, which again, I don't know how much it's appreciated. I've used it many times. I remember years ago I spoke for a group of young Zionists, what they call it. Young leaders that were going to be politicians, lawyers, and so on. And they were secular. They wanted me to present the Reb's approach. So I presented it, and you should see how they reacted. I used what the Rebbe said. I know time is limited here, so maybe I'll have to do another shir, hopefully next week, this will all be over. We don't have to talk about it anymore. But I don't know, b'derech hateva, that's going to be the case. But, so I said like this, the Rebbe many times emphasized that when he talks about Eretz Yisrael, there's two separate things here. There's Eretz HaKedesh, there's the first Rashi in this week's Parsha, that, listim atem and the Eibush Tekeich Ma'aser Higid La'ameh. And the Rebbe said that is the Torah and religious argument, so to speak. But then there's a logical argument that has nothing to do, simple, poshet, human nature. And Siman Shin Chavtes says that if you have a sworn enemy, even if they come to you, Al-Kash V'Teven, you have to mobilize even on Shabbos. Why? They're coming to negotiate, they want to deal commerce with you. What's Amal? Because they're a sworn enemy. They're guilty until proven innocent. If it's not a sworn enemy, it's another story. No, it's understanding you have an enemy does not mean they're attacking you every second. It means they could attack you every second. That's the point. And the Rebbe said befedish that the Gemara says, Afila b'nar doa, Afila chutz la'aretz. In other words, this is not a din Eretz Yisrael. This is not about Kedushas Haaretz, Shleimus Haaretz. This is about the fact that anywhere in the world, actually the Siman Shin Chavtes, I don't know if you know this, Crown Heights in Tov Shin Chavtes, Achon Shal Pesach, when the Rebbe spoke about not leaving Crown Heights, he uses the same Siman Shin Chavtes. You can't put Eden in Sakana. And wherever it may be. So I explained to them that this is a halacha taka, but it's halacha that is a tremendous lesson. You could even call it a military strategy or in human psychology. You have to understand an enemy. Never underestimate an enemy. Would you allow an enemy to move into your living room? They say, I only want your living room for a night. Of course not. That's ridiculous. What would happen if Mexico moved into the United States, like what happened last Shabbos in Simchas Torah and Eretz Yisrael? What do you think would happen? Or any sovereign country. So the Siman Shin Chavtes is such a tremendous lesson. I know many people, I don't want to repeat, but Chassidim told me, why does the Rebbe keep repeating Siman Shin Chavtes? It's not an obsession. It reveals the real facts on the ground. Hamas was an enemy only since on Simchas Torah, and maybe that was one of the mistakes. We let our guard down. We thought they changed. But enemy doesn't change unless you know it very clearly. You need proof that they changed. If in their charter it says, calling for the destruction of every Jew, and all Eretz Yisrael, they didn't change that. It doesn't matter what they're saying. So I don't know. I'm not trying to analyze again mistakes that were made. The point that we have to show strength, and this is not because we're right-wing extremists or right-wing and we like war. No one likes war. Chas v'sholom would rather not have any war. Like some of the people have been saying. If our enemies laid down their arms right now, you'd have total peace. I mean, sincerely, we'd have total shalom. If Israel laid down their arms, what would we have? Unbelievable what we could have. Whatever you saw would be nothing compared to the Retzichus annihilation. So the point being is that the strength that we have is a Gashmi Zdika, but also a Ruchni Zdika, and we have to be proactive. And most importantly, I want to say, since there's more to talk about, and I didn't cover everything, maybe we'll talk more if need be, that you have responsibility. I'm saying to you now, I'm speaking to everyone sitting here and anyone listening to this. We have to be leaders. That's what the Rebbe trained us to be. And when do you see a leader? In times like this. In calm times, you can't always distinguish who's who. But in a time of crisis, in a time where people have questions, and I can tell you, I have received thousands, if not more even. Can't tell you how many questions. I go simply, for many years I was a chazer, I was a maniach, I'm pretty familiar with the Rebbe's approach. So I feel confident that I use that. You have to know how to speak it, you don't have to translate it, you have to know how to communicate it. You're mechuyev, asachiyev in my opinion, that you have to understand the Rebbe's approach very well. You have to integrate it, you have to know how to communicate it to people. Whether it's issues about, we start hearing again, the shluchim on campus are suffering terribly. Their own Jewish students, some of them don't come now to Chabad because they're pro the other side. Israel is the criminal. What do you say? Now, there's some people you can't talk to, they have no seichel, they're completely brainwashed. But there are people that are not brainwashed. You have to know what to say to them. It's part of our Aveda, especially in a time like this. So it's critical that you inform yourself and feel responsible that we have to be soldiers. I said, Mechemes Beis David, Kol Yetzel Mechemes Beis David, we are also tzava. And the Rebbe said time and again, the only reason a person shouldn't enlist themselves in Sahal is because we're soldiers in the Ruchnis to confront. But if instead you're sitting and eating falafel or shawarma and sleep till 11 o'clock, no, you have no right not to go into the battle. And I'll conclude with one story that happened with my shver. My shver was here in the United States came in 1947 with Yisrael Goldschmidt and Mordechai Dubinsky. There are three Bochum from Tel Aviv. They lived with Rabbi Yael. They were all there in the Tel Aviv Chabad community. They came in Tavshin Zayin. My shver writes about this in his Yaman. Heske Gansberg. Brother Ichke Gansberg and Lev. The war, 1948, the War of Independence broke out in Eretz Yisrael. And my shver's father writes to my shver, your blood is not more precious than your brother's blood. Like they're going to battle, you have to come back to Eretz Yisrael and go to the war. Now, there was a Chabad Chassidim, but it was by Chabad, it was a given that when times like this is what you have to do. But of course, as the Rebbe, as the Frierdiker Rebbe was. So my shver asked the Frierdiker Rebbe what to do. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote back, or there was Baal Peh, B'Ksav, I'm not sure. This is what he told him. He said, an arik, a deserter in time of war is not someone who doesn't fight. It's someone who leaves his position. So if someone, for example, is running the communications for the army, the military, and he says, no, I want to go to the front line and become a tankist or something like that, that's the called deserter. You have a position, we're relying on you in communications. If someone has a job in administration or intelligence and so on, so the Frierdiker Rebbe said, your role in this time of war is to be also a part of the war. And since you're here by Shkoch Praise, to learn Torah, and wake up early, etc., learn Torah with the same passion that the soldiers are in Eretz Yisrael going to battle. It's a tremendous answer. And if not, the Frierdiker Rebbe doesn't say this, but I'm saying this. And if not, then in a chanami, what are you, just hanging around because you don't want to be in danger? That's not the approach. You have to be part of it. What did Moshe tell God and Reuven? He says, you want this land, you're going to have to fight, and you have to be part of the war. There's no such thing as pulling away. So we're all warriors here. Just a question in what fashion. And we have to have that attitude. And you can't imagine what kind of effect it has on people. So we have to feel like we are right now, the front lines near Gaza, and putting our b'meisa nefesh. Mesiras nefesh here, thank God, is not sakonis nefashis. But it has to be that approach. And if you don't have that approach, then I would say we're not fulfilling the Rebbe's directives. That's why the Rebbe during all these times, he was not saying, okay, you know what, we'll daven and we'll learn and ignore what's going on. Chaz v'shalom. We're very much part of it. So everybody so this is a time where a shliach, a chassid, has to rise to the occasion and do exactly as the Rebbe instructed us, which of course I'll just conclude with Maisa B'Peil. The Maisa B'Peil, Maisim, the Rebbe Mifsat film, Mezuzah, obviously things like Zokeh, learning more Torah, and of course, Achdus, Avos Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael. We all know that probably needs the most work, even in Eretz Yisrael and also here. So we have to do whatever we can to repair these rifts. I want to talk more about this, but I don't want to infringe on your, let's say, leisure time, even though it's a time of war. So,
Davening time.
Yeah, no, I understand.
That would be embarrassing.
Okay, but I think we have to take it very seriously and understand that this is a time where we have to rise to the occasion. We have to mobilize ourselves and enlist in the Tzivus Hashem battle of Kol HaMayitz and Mechemes Beis David. The Eibishter should help Leonim V'lo Yishin, should already have Rachmanis and protect firstly all the people sacrificing their lives for Eden. Be Menachem and give strength to the families that were shattered here. And of course the neshamas that were taken, what could you say? Our hearts are broken with them, and Mekan Lahabo should only be simchas and brachas, Tevanira v'anigla. People point out that the pasuk Tavshin Pei Daled in Teira, I have to look inside what the exact pasuk is, but it talks about destroying our enemies and Shmiras Yisrael. Someone pointed that out to me. I didn't look it up. They just said, look in Tavshin Pei Daled, the pasuk Tavshin Pei Daled, it's somewhere in Dvarim. And should only have brachas, and we should march to the Gula Amitis v'Ashleim v'Bekaru Mamash.